So it is with some skepticism that I report here certain statistics compiled after the liberation. First, there are those of Dom Gala, who figured that over 206,000 persons went through Dachau. Dachau, how do they say that? Dachau. Dachau. Like a cow that's been docked, a Dachau. It's fucking German, so I don't mind if you fuck up and butcher the shit out of it. I would put the figure closer to 450,000. Dachau being a sorting point not like Auschwitz, a camp where prisoners were sent to die. The number of Jewish prisoners was relatively low. I estimated at 5,000, but do not include those who arrived in the last days before the liberation or those whom the Americans found dead outside the camp gates. It's impossible to ascertain the number of deaths in the camp from 1933 to 1940. It was certainly more than something. I got a picture here. Americans enter the Jor House, April 29th, 1945. The Americans arrive in Dachau, 1st Battalion, 157th Regiment, 45th Division. So this is the liberation of the concentration camps that Kanye West doesn't believe, is happening. And then apparently they say there was a massacre, but it was a retaliatory massacre. They're going to kill all the dogs and the Nazis. They're going to kill all the Nazis and their dogs. So most likely this guy on the ground, according to the massacre, he's going to get shot and killed soon. So right now he's kind of saying, like, fuck you, dude. You piece of shit. Sitting there been fucking me over. Now here's the crematorium with the birdhouse, the flowers, and the dead bodies. This photo was taken by Gunn with a stolen camera. There's a guy that's walking into the house, and it looks like a pile of dead bodies. It looks like a pile of maybe, 200 dead bodies? So that definitely happened. There's definitely a dead pile of bodies there, and they'll have 20 different conspiracy theories. Maybe the Americans did it, right? Maybe it was Antifa. I bet it was Antifa, probably, right? Most likely. Well, Americans were the anti-fascists, so I guess we're just kind of being redundant there. Maybe it was the German, Nazis that they killed. Maybe that's just a pile of the German Nazis that they killed. Or maybe this is hard to get evidence of massive crimes that was happening in Nazi fucking Germany. Crematoriums. I heard that the Russians had crematoriums following their troops. So that way the enemy doesn't get a hold of the American soldier practicing golf at Dachau. Liberated women loving Dachau. Apparently this is more evidence of the Holocaust. And that's like some kind of German saying some fucking crap. I'll read the caption. The gas chamber at the moment of liberation, the hour of the last operation, was still written on the door. Since then, Germans have tried to deny that there was a gas chamber in the camp. This photograph is proof, and it was taken the day of the liberation. Gas Zeit. Zoo off. So the Germans tried to deny that there was a gas chamber in the camp. Inside the gas chamber, the Zyklon B bomb made by the German industrial giant IG Farben was dropped on the floor, and prisoners were told that they were going to take a shower. So I just want to read chapter 1 just to get the book started. The gift since noon. A white flag has been flying from the watchtower beyond the moat. The 3 SS men are walking the last rounds of a guard duty that has gone on for 12 years. They still have their machine guns trained on us as if they were out for an everyday pigeon shoot. But they have changed their get-up. No more of those black helmets that made them look like frogs. Now they have on worn gray-green tunics without armbands, without piping, without decorations. Down in our crowd, there are also some internees who have been waiting for 11 years, waiting for a liberation they no longer believe in. They are the least impatient ones. For them, time has lost all its relativity. They no longer count the days, nor the hours, nor the minutes, nor in order not to go stir crazy, they have long since given up such arithmetic. The white flag flying on this last Sunday in April seems to me also to be one of the cruel hoaxes of fate. Despite the repeated appearance in the livid skies of squadrons of silvery flying fortresses, despite the dull, far-off thunder of cannon, despite the sudden stampede of most of the supervisory personnel, we refuse to allow ourselves even the slightest of hopeful speculations. This is called the Day of the Americans. Yesterday afternoon, after all, wasn't there one of these dangerous false alarms? The entire camp was electrified by a gigantic convulsion. Everyone turned out to shout for victory. We were hugging each other, laughing, crying, and a goodly number of German inmates hiding under the eaves. Unknown to anyone except a few insiders of the resistance groups had come down from their attic hideouts to take part in the rejoicings. Then came the order from the International Committee. False alarm, back to your barracks. Don't give the SS men the pretext they're looking for to shoot into the pack. After that, we had surrendered to fate. The hours followed each other monotonously, and the only visible activity in the camp was the block orderlies continuing to pile up the corpses in the side alleys. At the very moment when the camp had been the victim of this premature illusion of liberation, the people of New York City had been seized by a comparable mad enthusiasm. There had been snake dancing in Times Square, and embarrassed President Truman himself had to call on the press to issue a formal denial of the victory rumors. I had got up rather late that Sunday, for I had stayed up practically all night. With the others, I had to carry out the patrols around the barracks. The orders from our underground resistance committee were clear-cut and make sure that none of the inmates venture out of doors, for any movement could only serve to provoke the SS men. Keep a close guard so that those prisoners who for so long had made themselves the accomplices of our barbaric jailers could not escape from the camp at the last moment to elude our revenge. And watch any attempt by the SS to carry out the liquidation of flamethrowers with which they had kept threatening us. We had a few stolen weapons, and we were certainly ready now for the first time in 11 years to put up a fight against them. Towards 4 in the afternoon, the sun, a pale Germanic sun, put in a timid appearance as if it were just a prop in the overwhelming Wagnerian stage setting. From the doorway of my barracks through the high-tension electric fencing, I could see only one piece of the diabolic jigsaw puzzle, which was Dachau, one plot of gray earth bordered by the rust-set walls of the crematorium, its factory chimneys clearly visible and ending at a series of wooden sheds which for us were the rim of the horizon. This last Sunday in April had brought us, certainly for the first time in 11 years, a muffled calm to which I found it difficult to grow accustomed. It seemed like the deathly tranquility of a city right after a monstrous bombardment. It was a no-man's land in time during which you are not very sure whether you will go on living or you're going to die, in which the silence is only an intermission between the two tragedies. Of course, from hour to hour, there was a courier who came from block number 1, where the International Committee had its headquarters, bringing the latest scraps of news gleaned from the radio about the advances by the Americans. But that afternoon, there were no more debates about strategy, no more corner cafe palavers. For by tacit agreement, we had all decided to give up such narcotic pastimes. We had to spare our nerves. We all had a tremendous physical need for rest, and the wise ones took advantage of the lull to get some sleep. and went to take a look around the rooms from which we veterans had moved out to make space for the new arrivals from Buchenwald, Auschwitz, Dora, and the other extermination centers. They were almost all Jews whom the Germans had been able just in time to spirit away from the camps under attack by the Allied armies, for even in his last agonizing spasms, the monster was not ready to let go of his prey. They came to us tottering, bloody, their heads bandaged, some of them dragging themselves on their knees, others lucky enough to have been transported on stretchers improvised with staves torn from the sides of boxcars. Some of them had spent up to 30 days in those same boxcars without food or water, and the rumor was that they had survived only by acts of cannibalism. They seemed like characters out of Dante's Inferno, so many Count Ugolina della Sherardescas emerging from their towers of hunger. We had put them all into one barrack, and in a few minutes they had turned it into a stinking stable in which it was hazardous to walk because of the puddles of excrement and vomit. It had not been possible to take them to the showers, which were no longer operating, and they were crawling with vermin. There were surely some dead among them, but it was hard to say who was simply sleeping or just too exhausted to give any sign of life. The others moaned unceasingly. Some of them recited Hebrew litanies, but their lamentations were drowned out by those who, on seeing me, called out to ask, to beg, to implore me to get them some bread, some clean straw, and aspirin, or merely some water. Patience, just a little bit more patience. We're almost at the end. The Americans can't be long now. You have to hold out. Victory is practically here. But they would not listen to me, and their groanings drowned out my voice. I tried to talk in Hungarian to a big redhead who, on their arrival, had shown his authority. He had put down the sowers of dissension who wanted to continue the feuds that had erupted during the journey. Come on, make them understand that we must have a little order, a little willpower. This can't last much longer. Ah, Baron, how can you preach to drowning cows? For us, there has never been any liberty. You talk just like a rabbi. Only death can put an end to our troubles, and that's all we're waiting for. Jehovah's will be done. And then he went back to his mournful chanting. What indeed did they know of the military situation, of the political elements at work? What of the devastation of German cities, the retreats, the exodus, the surrenders? Why should they have been fired with the burning faith of resistance? No one had ever taught them respect for democracy. They had no more homes to defend. The Germans had destroyed them all. They had no more fiancés, mothers, or children to go back to. The Nazis had probably cremated them, living in abject poverty on their farms or in their ghettos, having never received any other education than the rudimentary teachings of their synagogues. They had never understood the why of this cataclysm which had uprooted their lives. How then could they foresee the end of it? They had been in Dachau only a few days. But many others also shared this same skepticism. They too had given up, but those were the old-timers, the toughs, the Reds of the Dachau Commune, the jailbirds of the earliest days of Nazism. After 11 years, Dachau for them had become a way of life. Every man at the time of his arrest is instinctively convinced that his captivity will last only a few hours. Judicial error, mistaken identity, miracle, escape. Somehow he wants to believe that freedom is within his grasp. Then he tells himself it will be tomorrow, the next day, the end of the week, next month. Hitler was not washed away by another tidal wave. The war came. It will only last 2 weeks, the experts said then. Aerial bombardments will settle everything, just as the experts in our day now claim that an atomic exchange in a few hours will determine the fate of nations. But Hitler's war lasted 6 years, longer than any since the days of Frederick the Great, and he at least from time to time declared a breather. The inmates had been told that they would be free the day the Germans entered Paris, then the day the Germans left Paris, after Stalingrad, after the rout of Rommel, the fall of Rome, the invasion. The SS men had already started to open the doors of Dachau, a chink when Count von Stauffenberg's attempt on Hitler's life became known. Everything pointed to liberation in 1944 at Christmas, at Easter, next Christmas, next Easter, and now here we late comers were talking about getting out in April 1945. The tough oldsters looked at us derisively. 1945, why not 1946 or 1956 or maybe never? Dachau had only one immutable law. The only way out is up the chimney. The day is ending and already the shadows of twilight are casting a red tint on the rooftops of the SS buildings. Some of the fellows are getting ready for the night. There won't be any soup ration tonight, but then all of a sudden, like the call of the muezzin, there is a shout from the roof of the neighboring barracks where one of the prisoners is acting as a lookout. Die Sinda, Die Amerikaner! Die Amerikaner! The outcry is repeated, multiplied, blown up, and it echoes back to us like a chorus of an opera, a chorus of 33,000 throats. And as if the whole thing had been orchestrated in advance, we can now hear the cannon very near in the first full-blown burst of fire, and these are no longer random shots from men on guard. A real battle's broken out. We are now all outside. How we got there, I can't remember, but there we all are outside near the ditch, peering at the end of the field, hidden in shadows like children watching a show, waiting for the white knight to emerge from the wings. Now that he has slain the dragon, the 3 SS men are still in their turret, but now they have pivoted their machine guns in the other direction, away from us, and they too are peering into the distance. Here now, coming from behind, a cement mixer parked at the edge of the camp, an olive drab shadow with a spotted cape like a torero's and a helmet embellished with leaves and branches moves cautiously forward, submachine gun in one hand, grenade in the other. He's still quite far away, but I can already imagine that I see him chewing gum. He comes cautiously, yes, but upright, stalwart, unafraid. I almost expect to see him followed by a pure white charger. For at that moment, for me, as for all of us, for all those eyes that now saw him in one collective trance, he was like the cowboy of my youth, the one out of my favorite books and films who I was now seeing for the first time in flesh and blood. You would have been able to count on your fingers the number of those in Dachau who at any time in their lives had known an American or visited the United States, which before the war had been a terribly distant and unimportant country. We knew America only through its films, and the first image of the liberation was truly one of a tumultuous Western shot according to the time-honored rules. The soldier of the 3rd Battalion, 45th Combat Division, born in the American Midwest of Polish parents, had now come to Dachau, was for us in this moment of intoxication the very incarnation of the American hero. Not one detail was out of character. His bearing, his face, the way he held his machine gun, his submachine gun, his slightly ridiculous helmet. The silence was broken again by a burst of hurrahs, vivas, siegs, and dubras, but all these Tower of Babel voices harmonized to express the same cry of gratitude. We stood before the fence, up on the roofs. Some of us climbed into trees and raised our arms to the heavens, waving berets, handkerchiefs, some even jackets, shirts, or any random rag. And this mass of humanity, only a few minutes earlier so apathetic, so somnolent, indifferent, exhausted, was now alive with wild enthusiasm. The GI with the somber uniform became aware of our presence. He stopped nonplussed. He must have seen nothing but a multitude of skeletons dressed in tatters organized into a frightful dance of death. He was dispatched as a scout. Now here he was in the entryway of a Gehenna peopled by phantoms straight out of the second act of Fidelio. He discovered there the emaciated, desiccated, haggard faces whose boniness was even more accentuated by the contortions which tried to express happiness. The atrophied bodies covered with rags for zebra-striped prison uniforms were still a sign of great luxury. At Dachau, climbing up one on the other like tipsy cockroaches, the bleeding, the nauseating stench of our bodies and our clothing mingled with that of charred flesh coming from the fallout of the crematorium smoke stacks which clung to the nostrils. All this must have struck him like a hallucination, and the man in the olive drab uniform with the big helmet covered with leaves and branches, who had crossed all of Europe to get to us, shrank back, turned, and went to hide behind the cement mixer. We had frightened our liberator. First GI at Dachau, we will never forget those first few seconds. Even those of us who have died since you freed them must have carried with them into the other world the memory of that unique, magnificent moment of your arrival. We had prayed, we had waited, we had lost all hope of ever seeing you, but you had finally come, Messiah, from across the seas, angel and demon. You had come at the risk of your life into an unknown country, for the sake of unknown people, bringing us the most precious thing in the world, the gift of freedom. Today I know your name, but to me, to all of us who became brothers in that short instant of liberation, you always remain the unknown soldier, the myth. And it matters not whether today in your garage in Minnesota or Wyoming you scarcely remember the episode of that afternoon in the course of an almost endless expedition. Even if you should read these lines, you won't be able to understand what your brief appearance meant to us, to what extent it changed our lives, our way of thinking, our very gospels. For you, we were probably nothing but statistics. So many prisoners, so many dead, so many Poles, so many Spaniards, so many Greeks. This might have been worth the decoration, a special furlough, even a citation in the day's communique. It might have been a good subject of conversation for the folks back home, and afterward, a good yarn to tell your kids. For almost all of us in Dachau, as in the other hell camps of Europe, belonged to a cursed generation. We had been born during the first of the world wars, or shortly thereafter. We had grown up in the turmoil of these years that followed, lived through a series of devastating economic crises, inflation, unemployment, recession, adversity, only to be crushed in the meshing gears of ideological struggles, fascism, Nazism, Spanish Civil War, fiery crosses, iron crosses, swastikas, arrow crosses, and just plain crosses. Then came this war, the fleeing, the destructions and bombardments, the hunger, the prisons, the camps.